and just want to thank all of you for being here. I can't think of a better way to begin the week than being here at the New England Council breakfast. We have been very, very busy, to say the least. We were here on Friday of last week, the other side of the campus, with Senator John Kennedy, Louisiana, who spoke very highly of our very special guest speaker here this morning. And tomorrow we'll be in Boston, a very special conference on housing and how important housing is, not only just for people to find a home to purchase, but also it's a big issue with employers because it's a workforce issue. A lot of these employers will say to us, you know, we found the attractive candidate, but when the candidate found what the housing situation is like, we're not going to be able to accept that offer. So, big conference tomorrow in Boston. Congressman Stephen Lynch of Boston will be the keynote speaker. And believe it or not, we'll be back here again a week from today, where we have Jonathan Martin, Politico, who will give us a little landscape of the politics in New England and in the nation. So it's going to be a very busy period, to say the least. At the end of the month, we'll be back for another event, and that is we have the Deputy Secretary of Energy in Washington who will be coming up to speak about energy, the outlook here in New England. So anyone that's a member of the New England Council, you'll be getting all those invitations. It's been very, very, very busy. I think we've done over 30 events already this year in person, all over New England and in Washington, and they continue. So to all of you who are members, I say thank you, thank you. Speaking of thank yous, BAE is our sponsor for the breakfast here once again. We all know what BAE means to our nation and national security, but more importantly also, they are a wonderful, wonderful neighbor here in New Hampshire. And I can't say enough about their support to the New England Council and being represented today by Tom Bishop, who does a great job in representing this wonderful, wonderful company. I've often said if there's a worthy charity or worthy cause here in this community, BAE is going to be high on the list saying we want to be part of that because they believe they are part of the community. So we thank them for their support as well. I want to thank also Melissa Schuyler. She's the Senior Vice President of Government Affairs at Beth Israel Lahey Health, which you may be aware of, that they have established a very significant presence here in this Granite State in recent years with the Exeter Hospital, now part of the system. Needless to say, we are fortunate, New England Council, to have Melissa on our board with her vision, her input, her counsel has made the New England Council a better organization, and we thank her for all that she has done for the New England Council. She is now going to introduce our very special guest here this morning because I think she'll do a much better job than yours truly, and I know my place. So with that, I'm going to ask Melissa to introduce our very special guest.
Good morning, and thank you, Jim. It is a delight to be here with all of you this morning. On behalf of Beth Israel Lahey Health, we are so glad to be a part of healthcare in New Hampshire. We are also so glad to be a part of a state who has a leader like Senator Hassan. Across some of our facilities at Beth Israel Lahey Health, we have, so many of us, had the personal opportunity to interact with the senator on professional levels and on personal levels. And it's part of that. I talk to so many staffers who say, I'm so proud to have been able to take care of the senator's family and to feel like they are supporting and being a part of the leadership that she brings here to New Hampshire and to Washington, D.C. When there have been so many times in the past year and a half, if not more, I found myself saying, oh my God, what kind of a person are you about our national leaders? That is never something that we question when we think about Senator Hassan. And in fact, what we are so proud of and so appreciative of is that you are constantly telling the rest of us what it means to be the right person who is leading our state and our country and interacting with other leaders to show them. We see so regularly that you bring not only the depth of expertise from the many professional roles that you've held as a leader, but you bring every day to every interaction, being a daughter, being a mother, being a woman in this country, But what I love most recently, is how you very much brought being a mom to a child with disabilities right to the front of the Secretary of Health and Human Services, to bring all of the struggles of regular people right in front of us. And you did that with your own personal experience. Thank you for regularly sharing that about Ben with us. And asking our leaders, do you know what you're doing? And do you understand the impact that it will have on our families? And if you do, then tell me what that is, and what will you do with the power and the money and the policy that you have in your hands that will impact the families right here in New Hampshire? So, Senator, for doing that every day, for bringing everything that you are, the depth of all of that, to your role and the opportunities you have in that role, we thank you. I know.
Now you see why Melissa is introducing you, Senator?
It's going to get better, Jim.
Yeah. I know.
The two of you are going to now come have a little, coffee chat. But I would invite you to, give us a little entertainment. Bring to Jim some of the congressional grilling that you have brought, the sort of the forthrightness of, a graniteer that you have brought to some of those congressional hearings that we really have felt proud in and that we have all needed to see. So thank you. And here, have at it with Jim.
Guess I lost my place. Introduced.
First things first, I have to turn this on.
Can everyone hear the senator?
Testing, 1,
Okay,
2, 3.
good.
You never leave the mic on longer than you have to in my line of work. So first of all, Melissa, thank you so much. That was a beautiful. I wish my family had heard that. I might have gained a little bit in stature.
It's recorded.
It's recorded. And Jim, it's great to be
Yeah.
with you, and the New England Council. It's great to be here.
So tell me, what was it like being at that cage match last night?
I was, I was sitting at home with Tom and Ben and not watching.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Yeah, you had to pay for it.
Oh, do you?
Apparently, yeah.
Apparently.
No, it's
Okay.
not free.
Yeah.
One of the issues that I just mentioned, housing, that we're going to have that conference tomorrow, it's Congressman Stephen Lynch. House has passed a housing bill. The Senate has passed a housing bill. Wide margins. I mean, the Senate bill was filed by Tim Scott, Republican, South Carolina, Elizabeth Warren, Massachusetts. I mean, it's just great cross-section. But we're worried that it's only 6 weeks away from the recess in Congress. Will we be seeing a housing bill?
As you mentioned, and I think as everybody here has talked about, we just are in a housing crisis that you and I have been discussing in Washington updates here with the New England Council now for some time, for years, and an issue that I worked on back in the state Senate and as governor. So we are in this place now where both political parties understand that this is an imperative for our constituents at a time, especially when the cost of living generally is just stretching people in unconscionable ways. And so I think there continues to be good bipartisan support for the legislation. As Jim mentioned, this was work of Tim Scott, Republican from South Carolina, and Elizabeth Warren, who you all know well. Pretty far apart on the political spectrum, I think it's fair to say, but they came together on this. The House has passed their version. I think some of what the House changed is probably acceptable to the Senate, and I think there is a real determination to try to get this done. But having said that, we don't have a whole lot of time before the August recess and then before the midterms, and I will say it is hard when there's a kind of distraction of the day put to Congress, whether it is a $1.8 billion slush fund to reward people who assaulted law enforcement at the Capitol, or whether it's the appointment of a completely unqualified person to a national intelligence post. It means that every time we think we're getting to regular order where we can sit down and negotiate the final terms of something, something new gets thrown in our way. A couple of things people should know here about that housing bill. I have a provision in it that would support the creation of more modern manufactured housing that reflects the way people use manufactured housing now. There are some really outdated structural requirements for manufactured housing, which just makes it harder to produce and more expensive. And so we've got that in the bill. We've also got a provision that should speed up the development of rural housing. A lot of housing policy in the United States tends to be focused on our more urban and or suburban areas and not rural America. So this would allow USDA and HUD to speed up the approval process and work hand in hand and do some parallel permitting, if you will. And that should speed up the approval and building of rural housing, which continues to be one of the many housing challenges we have here.
One of the issues that's dominated you and your colleagues in the last couple of weeks is the anti-weaponization fund.
Yeah.
And the federal judge in Virginia ruled this past Friday that extended a block
Yeah.
on the administration proceeding with that $1.8 billion. Going forward, you and your colleagues were unsuccessful in getting actual language in that budget to say there'll never be a anti-weaponization fund established.
Yeah.
The administration, the Attorney General, or the interim Attorney General, the acting, has indicated that won't happen, but he says it verbally, and not in writing. And there are some members who are concerned about that appropriation may resurface in the future.
Yeah. I think we're all concerned about it because, the pushback was significant, as it should have been, a $1.8 billion fund that could be used to pay pretty much anybody the president decided he wanted to pay, a fund that was established through some level of manipulation of court process. So a judge in Miami is also looking at that. Remember, this is the president said this would be a settlement fund for a lawsuit against the government that he controls. So there's a legal issue about whether there was actually a real lawsuit. The other piece of it that is also vastly concerning is that the so-called settlement would give Trump and his family immunity from any kind of tax audits or liability for current or past tax liabilities. Right now, that estimate is that costs the United States Treasury $100 million because that's an outstanding bill. So we did, during this last budget process, you all probably have heard it referred to as the reconciliation process. It's one of the few types of legislation that we can do in the Senate with only a majority of 51 votes. And so the Republicans have passed this massive funding for ICE and CBP. Through that process, we tried to get them to support an amendment that would ban the $1.8 billion that would go to essentially the people who had assaulted the Capitol and assaulted police officers, among others. And while a lot of our Republican colleagues told us they were outraged by it, we weren't able to get enough votes on the amendment to actually pass it. And that is greatly disappointing to a lot of us because at the end of the day, standing up to unaccountable, corrupt behavior requires more than statements. It really does require votes when they matter.
Is there a way of getting around it by tapping into that judgment account?
There are other things we're looking at, and we are hoping to find other opportunities to get this banned. I think a lot of people in the Republican majority, a lot of people at the White House know that this is a very unpopular thing. I think it's going to, if the president persists in the nomination of Mr. Blanche to be confirmed AG, I think it is going to come up a lot.
Another issue that will be coming up shortly, and I know the Consul General is here from Canada. In 2020, the president signed the USMCA bill, and at the time he said it's one of the greatest bills that has ever been passed. And part of the language of that bill is that after 6 years, you have an opportunity to review, comment, suggest improvements. But his comments in the last 10 days basically was, we don't need Canada, we don't need Mexico. So it doesn't sound like we're going to be able to renew the USMCA bill. That's very important to us here in New England. We need Canada very, very much because of the oil, the lumber, the energy overall. So your thoughts on where we're going on the USMCA?
Yeah, so first of all, to the Consul General and her team who are here, thank you for being here. Yes, you're over there. Okay, I was looking for you. And to our Canadian friends and neighbors, you're our best friends. And so we will continue on a congressional member level to make that as clear as we know how to do. I've been to Canada now twice in the last year, up to Ottawa last summer on a bipartisan trip to talk about trade with the Prime Minister and members of his cabinet, and then just most recently to Iqaluit, Canada, which is above the Arctic Circle. If you don't know, it's pretty much the furthest north community and very important in terms of our security relationship with Canada. And it was an 8-woman bipartisan congressional delegation trip to the Arctic, and I'm happy to tell people about it later because it was just an incredible trip and an eye-opening one. But look, both Canada and Mexico have indicated their willingness to engage in renegotiations to update the USMCA. They are our trading partners. I don't have to tell people in this community, especially in New Hampshire, the impact on travel and tourism that both the trade policy but also the rhetoric coming from this administration has had. You go up to Solomon's grocery store in West Stewartstown, they have been a regular purveyor of goods on both sides of the border, and they are taking a real hit. And it's a real resource to our North Country. It's a real resource to Canadians on the other side of the border. And this rhetoric and the tariffs have really had a negative impact. So we will continue to work with the trade representative and members in the Republican majority. This is not, the concern about the tariffs and the concern about the president's hostility towards Canada is not a partisan concern. There are Republicans, especially in northern border states, who share it. And we just have to keep the conversation going at all levels and try to find ways forward here and try to ultimately change the president's mind.
Another issue that has been in the papers in the last couple of weeks is Social Security, and I see our friends are here, ARP. But the Social Security Retirement Trust Fund just came out with an alarming statistic saying that in 2032 we will be facing a major projection of loss. If it continues on that path, then retirees could be receiving 72% of their existing benefits. Also Medicare, Hospital Reimbursement Trust, Hospital Insurance Trust will also be unable to pay their full methods in 2033. I mean, these are alarming statistics. Is there an alarm going on with your colleagues to say, are we going to address this now, or are we just going to wait until the very end where I don't know what's going to take to make sure it's solvent?
So let's just be really clear. Millions of Americans depend on Social Security, a program they paid into. It has for 90 years paid people their benefit on time, without interruption, and we need to continue that history. There are straightforward things we could do that would result in increasing the solvency of the program without cutting benefits and without making our younger generation uncertain about whether Social Security is going to be there. And it starts with asking the very wealthiest among us to pay a little bit more into the system. That is the most straightforward and fairest way to do this. There are other ideas, and there's a working group in the Senate right now, a bipartisan one, looking at ways to adjust the funding model without compromising benefits. And so there are conversations going on. As always, Congress tends to act when pressure mounts and they have no other choice but to actually do something. And so I'd like us to take care of it sooner rather than later. But I also just will say that there are people on the other side of the aisle, not all Republicans, to be sure, but there are some people, along with the president, who have suggested from time to time that privatizing Social Security is a good idea. And it is not a good idea. Americans don't think it's a good idea. We need to protect it, and that's what we're committed to doing.
There is some talk that there might be a reconciliation budget 3.0.
Yeah.
Is there that kind of talk being mentioned in the Senate? I know the House has already talked about, they've been meeting, talking about what programs to cut in particular. Your thoughts on what you're hearing in the Senate side?
I haven't heard direct conversations in the Senate about another reconciliation. We've already had 2 this year, as you know. And look, they are hard things to do. They also, what the House is essentially saying, as far as I can tell, and I've just read news reports about it, is that they don't think the regular appropriations process is something that can work. We have, in fact, been continuing our bipartisan appropriations process all spring. We passed, the majority of the budget that has been passed for this fiscal year was a bipartisan, regular order appropriations process, which was a major step forward. Now, something like 2 or 3 times in the last 5 years, we've actually done the bipartisan appropriations work that we're supposed to do. We tend to get to it late. We tend to, everybody's kind of hanging on by their fingernails, seeing if we're going to do it, but we have been doing it, and it speaks to the capacity of members of both parties in the appropriations process to listen to each other, to absorb information about critical programs and government functions, look at any number of sources and come together and compromise and do a budget. And that's what we should be doing. So you will hear a lot of us, focused on the appropriations process. I think one of our biggest challenges right now is the difference that I understand between if you look at the bicameral process, so if you look at House and Senate Republicans together and House and Senate Democrats together, the big difference right now is that the Republicans are pushing what we call a top line for defense that is, we've been building up our defense budget steadily, that is huge, especially compared to the domestic programming, things like food stamps and Medicaid and Medicare. And so that's where the difference is right now, and we're working to try to get more parity in those 2 numbers and then work from there to get the budget done.
You're a senior member of the Help Committee, and education, in particular higher ed, has taken a severe cut last year, and threats of more cuts this year. Yeah. Your thoughts on what you and your colleagues can do to prevent some of these cuts from enacting? Yeah,
so first of all, just a huge thank you to the New England Council, to all the members of the college and university community who are here and who are members of the council and throughout the region, because your voices made a huge, huge difference. As you know, the administration early on discontinued some grants, froze some funding, withheld some funding, and it caused enormous uncertainty for the colleges and universities, for the faculty who work there, but for the students and for the people who participate in some of the grants, especially the clinical studies that places like Dartmouth were doing. Thanks to people raising their voices, the appropriations process that I just talked about, that we completed something like 95% of in January, did a few things. It not only restored NIH funding, but it increased it. It rejected the president's call to slash Pell Grants, and it reinstated the TRIO and Gear Up programs, 2 programs that are critical for first generation. Thank you, TRIO.
Randy Schroeder.
They're critical for first generation or disadvantaged students to get access to college. And so, and I got to say, there is nothing like sitting with a group of middle schoolers in the Gear Up program. I think it was up in Somersworth, and them saying to us, but this is a really important program. Senator, how can I help? They were great. It was, and we talked about how you write letters and how you get people in other states to write letters. So we were able, because of the bipartisan support for higher education, along with bipartisan support for apprenticeships and workforce training and career and technical education, all of which is really an important part of the mix. But we were able to preserve these critical points of access so that young people in New Hampshire and around the region have the opportunity to chart their own path and decide which path, which goal of getting into the workforce or seeking higher education is right for them. So we'll continue to fight for these programs, but you all have done a great job in establishing and solidifying bipartisan support, and you should know that. And it's one of the things, the other thing about the appropriation process is because it's a long-term, committee by committee, budget item by budget item kind of back and forth with a lot of detail and a lot of paper, it doesn't get day-to-day coverage that actually allows people of good faith to work hard to sort out budget issues and get something reasonable done. And that's why you all speaking up and just staying with it allowed the people kind of doing the day-to-day work behind the scenes to get this done.
Rural health continues to be a priority here in New England. I believe you and your colleagues were able to secure some $204 million from that Rural Health Transform program. Can you talk a little more about additional services that you could be able to help in this area of New England in light of cybersecurity and funding flexibility overall?
Sure. Let me just take a step back. The $204 million transformation fund, rural health transformation fund, that the administration established when they passed the first reconciliation, the budget bill last summer, is a tiny step forward after 9 steps backward. And by that I mean this. The $204 million is less than 10% of the overall health care funding that the administration cut for New Hampshire. So it cut millions of dollars, billions of dollars for New Hampshire Medicaid, which serves not only our poorest families and children, but single adults under a very low income cap. It is critical for addiction treatment. It is critical for pregnant women. I forget the numbers in New Hampshire exactly, but nationwide, I think over half of pregnant women get their health care through Medicaid. So what the administration did was impose these huge Medicaid cuts and then said, oh, by the way, here's $204 million, which sounds like a lot of money, and in New Hampshire, it is, but it's not nearly what they cut. Moreover, and Melissa, you may know this better than I do in the impact, but it is not allowed to be used for direct patient care. So we've got major Medicaid cuts that will impact coverage for tens of thousands of Granite Staters. And then we've got this fund that should help with some of the infrastructure challenges that our hospitals have, but it doesn't help them with the patient care side in a particularly effective way. And at the end of the day, you need people who know that when they go to the hospital, it's not going to bankrupt them. You need people to know that they have that coverage so they can get the care at the right place at the right time. Otherwise, it not only is devastating for them, it costs us all more money in the end because they end up in the emergency rooms in acute health care need, needing extensive and expensive care. In New Hampshire, the other thing to know is that those Medicaid cuts that were enacted last summer as a pay-for huge tax breaks for the very wealthiest and corporate special interests. I mean, this is not a proportional thing. The tax breaks are significant. The harm to our healthcare system is devastating, and it has meant already that 2 clinics in our rural part of the state have had to close. That means longer trips and longer wait times for rural Granite Staters. Again, not to balance the budget, but to give people huge tax giveaways, and ultimately to undermine our healthcare system and make it more expensive, even more fragmented, even more fragile than it already is. So we'll continue to work to restore funding It's one of the things that we're talking about. The president ran for office saying he'd lower people's costs. Between the Medicaid cuts and then the refusal to extend these tax credits for people who buy insurance through the ACA, healthcare is one of the many items I'm hearing about from Granite Staters all the time. They do not know how they can pay for their healthcare and also pay for housing and food and energy and daycare.
Just before the end of 2025, the Joint Economic Committee that you are the co-chair of released an interesting study on the impact of tariffs on the 3 states that border Canada.
Yeah.
And it showed ranges from 25 to 30% cuts in tourism, which is devastating to those areas, and in New Hampshire in particular, because your state has been impacted the most from the tariffs. That loss of revenue, is there anything that Congress can do about that?
Look, in a typical budget year, New Hampshire, travel and tourism is our second biggest sector. When you take a 25 to 30% hit, that impacts revenue. And as we all know, New Hampshire is a frugal place, and we depend on things like revenue from travel and tourism to help us make our state budget balance. And it's also critical for the businesses and for the people they employ. And so we continue to advocate against the tariffs. There has been bipartisan support now for bills that would essentially curtail the president's tariff power. We have not been able to get those passed out of both the Senate and the House. There's obviously the point that the president can veto these bills. So this is really about putting pressure on Republicans up and down, in the House, in the Senate, up and down the dais, to join with us and get the kind of significant majority we need to say no. As you know, the court has ruled some of the president's tariffs illegal or unconstitutional, and then he, has found other tariffs, some of which will expire in July, and then he says he will reinstitute them. It is beyond frustrating that so many people of all political persuasions, all walks of life, have told the White House how damaging these tariffs are, and they are still sticking with them.
The administration has been engaged in some provocative actions around the world with Venezuela and Cuba and now Iran. Your thoughts on the Iran, quote, settlement language of the memorandum?
I'll just take a step back and start with the fact that this war was started without consulting Congress, which means without consulting the American people. It has cost us American lives. It has cost us American credibility around the world that will take some time to rebuild. And it has cost us treasure. It has cost us significant tax dollars. And then at home, obviously, with rising gas prices, it was kind of the last thing families who are struggling to pay their bills needed. It also was started with no strategy. And so here we are with a deal that was announced yesterday. Most of us haven't seen the details of the deal. I think some of the details are still being worked out, so I'm going to need to wait and see. But members of both political parties, hearing what they think is in the deal, have expressed concern with it. And let me just be clear. We still don't know from this deal what Iran's nuclear capacity is, or what kind of restraints this deal would put on their capacity to develop nuclear weapons. And lastly, the president has made a big deal overnight about the fact that the Straits of Hormuz will be open without tolls. I will note that they were open without tolls before the war began. And so it is an extraordinarily troubling set of events that took us to war when we didn't need to go to war. Iran has been willing to negotiate and limit its nuclear capability and have inspections and oversight in the past. And I expect that if this deal goes through and holds, we will be back to where we were before the war.
Just to change subject quickly on politics, what are you hearing from your colleagues from the DNC that keeps New Hampshire first in the nation?
I think probably everybody in this room knows how passionately I feel about the First in the Nation primary, and I think everybody here does too, and look where we are. I'm envying the sled dog ride over there. And I think Jonathan Martin, who you're going to hear from in just a little bit, will have more to say about this. But look, so the DNC Rules and Bylaws Committee is undergoing the process of deciding what the early window of presidential primaries will look like for the Democrats. I was down presenting to the Rules and Bylaws Committee on behalf of New Hampshire. What we basically said to the Rules and Bylaws Committee was, give us the New Hampshire treatment. New Hampshire is known for vetting people, judging authenticity, making candidates into even better candidates, and hopefully, eventually, maybe some of the lucky ones become better presidents because of the experience they have here in New Hampshire. And we're not asking for first in the nation status because we've always had it, although we've always had it because it was our idea to have a direct voter nominating process in the first place, but also because our citizen engaged government, our 400-member House, our myriad of town councils and school boards and zoning commissions and volunteer citizen engagement means that we are very prepared to vet candidates in a grassroots, real way. And we are the state. What we argued to the DNC was, look, we are the lowest barrier, best access early primary state, meaning you don't need a war chest and you don't need an entourage to come to New Hampshire and put yourself out there and learn from rural farmers in the North Country to manufacturers in Manchester to union members on the seacoast and everything in between, all in one day, a whole lot about what people's priorities are and the direction they'd like to see the country go in. New Hampshire has never argued we should decide who the nominee is going to be. We have argued that we're the best first step in the process of early states. We prepare people for the next steps in larger states that require more money and more infrastructure. And so we made the case. We think we make better candidates and better presidents, and we'll wait and see. But in any event, remember that the New Hampshire Secretary of State will follow the law, and we're going to have the first primary. So the question becomes kind of who participates in it. And I expect the candidates will come here because it's just such an important and productive testing ground.
We have a couple of minutes left for a question. Let me just, I know you had a question on Friday. I just want to make sure everyone has a chance to have
Jim
a question.
is like the steel trap mind here.
Yeah,
He's remembering Friday.
Is there someone from New Hampshire that would like to ask a question of the? I have plenty of questions. I just thought I'd give you a chance.
Sandy's there.
Sandy.
Well, I was going to ask a primary question, but Jim
Yeah.
took it. So the question
yeah.
I was going to ask a primary question, but Jim took that question. So I'll ask about another thing I know we've been in to chat with you about, which is LIHEAP. And I was just wondering what your perspective on LIHEAP going forward is.
As you know, the administration has pushed to cut LIHEAP significantly. We have fought back. We try to partner with other northern states, in particular, Republicans and Democrats, and we'll continue to fight as hard as we can for it. I haven't seen the most recent numbers about what's being proposed, but as you all know, LIHEAP is the program that helps people heat their homes and cool their homes when they otherwise can't afford to. It helps them with things like weatherization too, and it's cutting it is one of the more penny wise, pound foolish things people could do, because obviously if people can have help not only heating and cooling their homes, but also help making their homes more energy efficient, we all save. And so we'll continue to fight for it. There's good people understand, regardless of what political party you're in, people understand what the impact of cuts to LIHEAP are in the northern parts of the country in particular. It's also, in some southern places it helps people cool their homes too, but we'll continue to fight for it. And it's an absolute kind of key piece of the safety net for working families.
Just for the benefit of the people who may not know what LIHEAP, Low Income Heating Assistance Program, which is desperately needed here in the cold areas of the New England and the Northeast, but also, as you just said, in the southern states and Florida and Arizona and Texas. They rely on that LIHEAP, but it's been on the chopping block for a while, so we'll see. Other questions of the senator?
May I?
It's all yours. It's all yours.
I involved anybody else, please. Thank you so much. And I am a New Hampshire guy, by the way, Jim, so I'm in the right place.
Right.
Thank you, Senator, for being here. As Jim mentioned, I was here on Friday as well, chatting with Senator Kennedy, so I understand the importance of bipartisan conversation, which I know you're a champion of.
Yep.
So I'm curious if you can point to a couple of specific issues in the state where you feel is the strongest bipartisan momentum right now, and if there are one or two that you could tweak the lever to shorten the gap as well.
Wow. Well, I think you've seen some good bipartisan work in terms of specific New Hampshire state issues. One in the university and college space that I talked about. Two in the area of preserving our experimental forests in New Hampshire. Hubbard and Bartlett, Hubbard Brook Bartlett, have both been. They've done research and create data that helps preserve our natural resources, to be sure, but also helps the timber industry test best practices, and it has been critical in gathering the data, for instance, for the Clean Air Act. And as I said, when they said, well, we're just going to move some of the functions elsewhere in the country, I said, you can't move the trees. Like, this is all about studying the trees here in New Hampshire and the ecosystem that they're in. So that's an area where there's been some good bipartisan work. I think the place where we should be able to make more change than we have been able to is around the issue of trade and tariffs. Privately, my Republican colleagues, not all of them, but a healthy majority of them tell me that they think this is wrong, and that they think it's not working and it is hurting. So in New Hampshire, I haven't broken it down by inflation, tariffs, and a couple of the other factors here, but the average New Hampshire household has spent $3,900 more since Donald Trump took office than they did in the previous time. And that just, think about what $3,900 over the course of a year means for a working family, what bills they choose not to pay, what programs they don't enroll their kids in. It's remarkable. And privately, most of my Republican colleagues say they are free traders and they don't believe in these tariffs. And that's a place that is really hurting the country, really hurting the economy. And frankly, I'll let Jonathan Martin talk to this more, but the tariffs are highly unpopular. And one of the things that is really, I think it's one of the most fundamental things concerning us right now. And again, I think this is at some level a bipartisan concern when you talk to people on the ground. If our political system in this democracy were functional, the opinions of regular people about what the administration is doing would matter to the administration. The whole notion of a democracy is that we all have an equal seat at the table. That pushes compromise, right? Because if everybody has an equal vote, equal voice, you got to listen to each other, you got to be creative, and you got to come up with the American way of doing things, which is what's made us so successful. And yet, right now, what we have is an administration that is focused on self-enrichment. Look, the tax liability issue, the $1.8 trillion slush fund is just the tip of the iceberg. The Trump family has enriched itself by billions, hundreds of billions of dollars since he took office a year plus ago. And they seem completely immune to what the country actually thinks of some of these critical policies. And that is a symptom of a democracy where at least a subset of elected officials don't feel that they have to be accountable to ordinary people. And so, when people ask me, why should I care about democracy? I'm like, well, take it away from the abstract. Democracy is your assurance that the people you elect will actually deliver meaningful change and meaningful help. We've talked about the housing policy. We've talked about energy policy. We have a food industry that is so consolidated that it's harder and harder to find competition that would help drive costs down. There are policy ideas to lower the cost of childcare, lower the cost of health care. It's not just insuring everybody. We have to lower the overall cost of health care. There's bipartisan interest in doing that. And yet, when push gets to shove, we don't seem to be able to get some of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, and I suppose some people would argue some of my colleagues on my side of the aisle, but we don't seem to be listening, and the administration does not seem to care what average citizens think and what voters think. And so that's one of the reasons you hear so many of us talking about focusing on democracy, making sure our elections are secure from interference, and making sure that we revive a sense in America where elected officials really spend time with and listen to their constituents.
We mentioned that you're 6 weeks away from the August recess, and most people think once the recess is over, you go back in September, there's not going to be anything going on because it's too close to the election. Democrats are going to say, we don't want anything to pass that's going to make us look bad. Republicans are going to say, we're going to pass something that makes us look good, but there's going to be just a conflict, and at the end of the day, very little probably will be done between September and the election. But what's on your wish list between now and the August recess?
Yeah.
Obviously, the housing bill would be very important. National defense, obviously.
Right.
Reauthorization. Those are two big ones, but your wish list.
National defense authorization and certainly housing top of the list. We're having a markup, which just means the way we vote in committee on bills to get them to the next stage, to the floor, on some critical health care bills. We're doing one, this is Monday, right? Yes, one on Wednesday, and then I think one in July as well. A couple of the items there that I'm working on in particular, one is on limiting the degree to which pharmaceutical companies can gain the FDA approval system. As you know, when a pharmaceutical company says it has come up with a new patent, it gets an exclusive right to sell that drug for a certain period of time. Some of the big pharmaceutical companies have become really expert at tweaking their patents just enough so that they can keep extending that exclusivity and keeping the price high. So we've got a bipartisan bill that would really limit one of their favorite ways of doing this. That's something I'm watching. I have a maternal health bill that is another piece of rural health care that is really important. New Hampshire has lost about a dozen maternity wards in the last 20 years. And now more women than should be the case have to go drive at least an hour to get to maternity care for labor and delivery. So one of the things we have a bipartisan bill to do would be to say that we'd have training and equipment provided through federal grants to every emergency room so that they are prepared to handle an obstetric or reproductive health emergency, and a 24/7 telehealth line with experts on it who could guide them in that process. So that's, that's part of the overall health package that we need to do. We were able to get reauthorized the Support Act, which is about addiction care, which is going to continue to be a critical priority of mine. And then I think, look, there are a number of issues that I want to keep pushing on. Kind of lost in the conversation over ICE and CBP in the last few weeks, really, is the fact that even though Democrats said no to voting for funding for those two agencies without reforms. What the Republicans then responded with was doing a reconciliation bill to fund ICE and CBP at levels they have never been funded at before without a formal legal agreement that ICE and CBP would follow the kind of guardrails and professional conduct that law enforcement throughout the country follows. Judicial warrants when you're going into somebody's home, no masks, body cameras, IDs on your uniforms, training and detention standards. I was part of a bipartisan group that was negotiating with the White House on those reforms. I thought that if we had stayed at the table a little bit longer, we could have gotten, this was after Secretary Noem left, we could have gotten to where we needed to go. I think the country was rightly outraged by the killings of Alex Preddy and Renee Good. The agencies have gotten quieter as they've gone about doing detentions and deportations, but we are really concerned that they're not following due process the way they're supposed to, that's the hallmark of American democracy, and that they're not focusing on the most violent undocumented residents. They are focused on anybody they think they could arguably sweep up into their net and meet quotas. And so I'll continue to push for some of those reforms. Some of the people within the agency have been pretty receptive because they're law enforcement professionals, and what we're asking for isn't anything that your local police department or our state police here don't follow. But at the end of the day, that's something that I think is really important because, look, we need secure borders. We need strong and new policies and technology and personnel at the southern border in particular. We need to be smart about how we go after international criminal cartels and human traffickers. But we also need the kind of fair and constitutional system here at home to adjudicate asylum claims. The last thing I'll say is we need just a lot more asylum officers so we can make those decisions more quickly and deport people who should be deported. So that's a long thing, but that's the unfinished business in my view, one of the pieces of unfinished business of this Congress. And we had some consensus, at least in the Senate, about ways to go about this that would honor who we are as Americans and make us safer too. And I want to continue to try to do that.
Well, we want to thank the Senator for an enlightening conversation. I think we touched on higher ed, health care, foreign affairs, energy, housing, tariffs, USMCA. So pretty good cross-section of the issues. Needless to say, she has an awful lot on her plate, but her advocacy is needed now more than ever to move some of these important issues. And she's also a senator that works across the aisle to find common ground on some of these important issues, which is what we need now more than ever. So she's a gem, not only for her state, but for our nation. And we're blessed to have her, but always available to the New England Council. Yeah. And I might say always available to all of her constituents. She's got terrific staff here, as well as in D.C. Yeah. So with that, I just want to thank all of you for being here. A week from today, we'll have Jonathan Martin from Politico, which I think will be really a fun session, to say the least, for all the political junkies out here. He's one of the best in the business. So with that, we hope you have a great day and a great week. Thank you very much.
Thank you all very much.